where I left off, making the biggest mistake of my life. So I had decided it was time to ask my parents to help and support me get on disability, not knowing that they were narcissists. I didn't think that there would be a problem with it. I had figured that over the years, they may have learned how to become more supportive of me, but they hadn't. Just as their generation found it shameful to have someone in the family with a mental illness, it was also shameful to have someone in the family on public assistance. So my parents were not a fan of the idea. Instead, what they did is they told me that they would go ahead and take care of paying for my monthly expenses so I wouldn't have to cash out my 401ks early, and that they would continue to give me the money until such time as I was able to return to work. My gut instinct was this was not a good idea, that this was not going to be a relatively short period of unemployment like I had experienced in the past due to my depression, that it was going to continue on for a while. But they were very insistent that they wanted to give me the money so I would not lose the condo that I had bought and still do live in. And I began telling myself, well, maybe it won't last as long as I'm fearing. Maybe I will be able to return to work relatively soon. So rather than press on to ask them to get me on disability, I went ahead and I accepted their offer to support me. Their idea of covering my monthly expenses was a little bit more limited than it needed to be. Probably the biggest problem was they were not willing to give me enough to cover getting health insurance so I could continue medical treatment and trying to find ways to possibly get my depression under control without resorting to the ECT. This was occurring before the Affordable Care Act was written into law, so there was no marketplace for low-income and unemployed individuals to find low-cost health insurance. Medicaid being another form of public assistance, my parents didn't want me on Medicaid either, so I had no health coverage. As a result, my depression just kept getting worse. I got to the point where I gave up driving because I didn't care what happened to myself, but I was afraid that during one of my depressive episodes, I might not be paying sufficient attention to my driving or make a bad choice and put others at risk, and I wasn't about to do that. It was something I had promised myself many, many years before, is that I would never do anything that would put others at risk due to my own personal pain if I could possibly avoid it. Without the driving, I was no longer getting out to visit my old roommate and her husband. So my social life kind of got cut off. My condo became my world. My parents would come over to visit me about once a month on average. They would take me out for lunch, sit and chat for a while. I stopped speaking with my sister and other relatives that I used to stay in contact with on a regular basis. I then lost contact with my old roommate and her husband when they were dealing with some family situations of their own, and I didn't feel like I should stay in contact with them and have them listening to my own problems while they were dealing with their family issues. My parents also began gaslighting me in a pretty consistent way, and otherwise emotionally manipulating me during their visits. One of their common tactics was they would come over and we would be chatting, and then they would stop and ask me, well, is there anything else you need? What can we do to help you? I knew this situation just was not working out. So I would say, help me sell my condo, find a smaller place that's less expensive to live in, help me get on disability. And their response would be to immediately start talking about the last cruise they had been on, what they would do with money if they ever won the lottery, just all sorts of things, anything but address what my response to them was. This went on for a couple of years, and at one point I finally decided I was going to test things. Were they just asking out of habit and not listening to me at all, or what? On one of their visits, again, the question comes up, is there anything we can get you? What can we do to help you? And I said, the next time you come over to visit, why don't you bring me a pastrami sandwich? And it was, oh, what a wonderful idea. Pastrami sounds really good. We'll do that the next time we come over. And so for the first time, and it was probably 2 or 3 years, they addressed how I answered them, because it didn't touch on their, I don't even know what to call it, their fears, their stigmas surrounding my mental illness and my need for assistance. And so I just gave up at that point. They would ask the questions. I would say, I can't think of anything. And they would just leave it at that until it finally got to the point where they even stopped asking what they could do to help me. Because I was just so deep into depression, and it's, family's supposed to be there for you when you're in need. And if family's not going to be there for you, why would anybody else? So I just gave up to occupy my time when I wasn't just laying in bed with my eyes closed, tuning the world out. I had my computer, and so I'd be playing online games, and I did manage to make some friends through online gaming, but the online gaming community being what it was, had its drama. I I have to admit some fault at this, is a lot of times I'd be a little bit too easily drawn into that drama. But for a while there, I was playing with a group of people that, for the most part, I really enjoyed playing with them. We were having a good time. We were relatively successful in what we were doing compared to most of the other players on our same server. But some of them decided they wanted to go a little bit more hardcore. It wasn't a popular idea, but it was like, okay, if you guys don't agree to go hardcore, we're just going to go leave the group anyways. And so it kind of forced the rest of us into agreeing with them just for the sake of keeping the group together, because we'd all been having so much fun. And because they wanted to go more hardcore, they wanted to bring extra people into the guild as backups, one of whom I had some very serious personal issues with a few years prior, which were partially related to my depression. And I told them up front, I don't want this person in the guild. It's been a problem in the past. She was even before I had problems with her. I know of other players that had been having problems with her as well. She's just a troublemaker. And they were like, no, 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 she'll be fine. This was years ago. She won't cause any problems this time. And I just said, okay, I will agree for now, but I'm telling you, the moment she starts causing problems again, I'm out. I'm just going to leave. And they're like, that's not a problem. She's not going to cause any problems. You can guess where this is going. She caused problems. Didn't take her very long. I want to say she'd probably been in the group for about 6 weeks. And then it started up. And so I left. The next thing I know, they're attacking me. They're accusing me of things I hadn't done, or they're misrepresenting and exaggerating some things that had happened, but had no malice or anything involved, unlike what they were telling other people. And that pushed me into another suicide attempt because I just couldn't handle it. People that I had thought were friends clearly weren't, or they were being pressured by the ones that weren't friends to cut contact with me, and being caught in the she said, they said, felt forced into siding with the theys and stopped talking to me. So I was probably a period of 6 months or so, and I'm dealing with this, and I'm in and out of the hospital because I'm just suicidal. I did have a couple of people that were trying to stay neutral in it in the middle of all of this, but it got to the point where they felt they just couldn't take it anymore and they had to make a choice, and they cut contact with me. So I had, oh, pardon me, really no support of any sort from any source left. And I would continue to have the occasional random player come up to me talking about the rumors they had heard about what was going on between me and the old group. All of this going on top of what my parents were doing to me was not helpful at all. As a result of the suicide attempt, I had been automatically enrolled in the county health system for a while, and my parents would come and take me to appointments and then, tell me that, "Oh, Jesus, this doesn't seem like this is doing anything for you," which it wasn't. Unlike my previous experience with the county several years before, uh, where they had helped me out and gotten me, the medication that was helped me at least a little bit, and I had the therapist that taught me about forgiveness. At this point in time, the county was a very different environment, and I just kept getting told over and over, the county doesn't help those who can't help themselves. All I can think in my head was, and who are those who are unable to help themselves supposed to get help from? Because if I could help myself, then I wouldn't have a need for the county. I felt trapped. I wasn't getting support from anywhere. And depression just left me feeling so very, very helpless. I didn't know what to do. And my parents were continuing their visits and their gaslighting, even after I stopped, decided to stop going to the county because it was obvious I wasn't going to get the help I needed from the county at that point. My anxiety started kicking in really hard on top of the depression, to the point where I couldn't even bring myself to walk outside of my condo to take out my trash, to get my mail, to go out to lunch with my parents. It was something my parents would end up handling those things for me on their visits. I had just closed down and withdrawn, and I would still play games. I did not go back to playing the one game where all the drama happened. I would just play other games, and I would just, even if there were MMOs, I would stick to myself instead of trying to interact with other people, because who do I trust? And then my dad's health started failing. My mom was having to spend a lot of time caring for him. Their monthly visits became less frequent, and then they stopped until after my dad's passing. Didn't feel much of anything when Dad passed away. It sort of bothered me, but it also didn't bother me. And I mean, certainly considering what my parents had done and the way that they had basically treated me my whole life, it shouldn't be surprising I didn't really feel much of anything. My mother, of course, went through her grieving period, and she would tell me about how my sister was helping her sort out things with respect to my dad's effects on phone calls that she had started making when they stopped coming to visit. And about 6 months or so after my dad passed away, Mom was making one of her phone calls, and at that point, she's like, gee, I guess I'm starting to understand what you've been feeling all of these years being alone. Immediately started going in and on how depressed she was, how lonely she was, this and that. She didn't know what I had been through because they didn't want to pay any attention to what they were doing to me. I was just a problem to them that I think they wanted to disappear. But I was in my cycle of listening to my mom talk because I know she wasn't really listening to anything I would have to say anyways. And there are times on these phone calls where I would try to say something and she would just talk right over me as if I'd never said anything at all. I mean, again, I had forgiven my parents all those years ago. I just hadn't gotten as good at setting boundaries as I should have. Stayed in contact with mom, would talk with her on the phone, or rather, I would listen to her on the phone. She did start saying how, gee, I should be on disability because her savings was down to a very, very low amount because of support that they were giving me, which, well, no point in me pointing out and that it was their idea and not my idea. My idea was to get myself on disability in the first place. My parents also had been supporting my brother basically his entire life, not because he had health issues or anything like that. Basically, he was just lazy. He didn't want to have to do anything. Unlike me and my sister, where they would very heavily encourage us to be working and supporting ourselves, they didn't do that with our brother. So he had just been living at home with them all that time. I'm not certain how to describe what I was really like. I was there and I wasn't there. I existed, but I didn't have a life. Thoughts of how it would be better to be dead were constantly with me, although I never made any more attempts on my life because they hadn't worked in the past, and they probably wouldn't work if I tried again. Went through my daily routine of getting up when I could, and I'd get myself something to eat, and I would get on my computer, bury myself in my computer. A lot of times I wouldn't actually be doing anything on the computer. I would just pretty much be staring at the screen, absent-minded, unfocused. I didn't bother grabbing my mail at all. I started throwing my trash out onto my patio. I would have it bagged first. I was always very good about that part of it, at least, making certain that, I was doing the normal bagging of the trash. Just couldn't bring myself to walk outside to go to the dumpsters to take the trash out. And so the patio itself was very choked with weeds and ivy and overgrown because I had long since stopped trying to take care of it. One day I said, or I didn't say to myself, something inside of me said, you need to write down your story because eventually you're going to die and others should know what you went through. And so I chose to make it my birthday gift for that year to myself. Not that I had any money to actually buy myself any birthday gift because with my mom's financial problems, she had stripped down what she would pay for my monthly expenses to an absolute bare minimum. And so I spent 3 days sitting at my computer, writing out my life's history as best as I could remember it. And then I made myself one more promise. I said, if somehow I got sent any birthday greetings from anybody that year other than my mother, that I would reply to them and send them what I had written out. And I did get a couple of greetings from one of my cousins and from my sister. They read it. My cousin forwarded it to my mother. My sister was basically no contact with my parents at this point in time. She would still be there in case of a medical emergency, mostly because my brother was useless in those situations, even though he was living with them and had his own car to drive and all of that. That was the limit of it. And my sister gave me more information about why she did it later. But that's not appropriate for me to share here. But it kind of broke the ice. And it got me and my sister kind of talking again for the first time in over a decade. Yeah, that's how long I was in this isolation situation that my parents designed for me. I mean, it didn't really make things better for me, but it was something. It was that little crack opening in the door to let a little bit of light in. The big crack that opened the door to really prompt my turnaround was an episode of very severe lower back and hip pain I experienced. There was a period of about 3 weeks where I couldn't sleep outside of very short snatches. I'd get maybe 3 or 4 hours of sleep per week. I couldn't eat, or if I tried to, it would just aggravate the pain even more. I was just I couldn't do anything. I was in such pain. It was horrible. I've never been through pain like that before. It just kept going on and on. I can't say it continued to get worse. I mean, it kind of hit a plateau on the pain level, but it was still extremely severe pain that was making me incapable of doing anything at all. When I said to myself, you can't go on like this. It's impossible. Either kill yourself or get help. And it's up to you to get the help because family doesn't care. I decided I would take a chance despite the very unpleasant experience that I had had during that suicide attempt several years before, and see if I could get help from the county. This time they were ready to help. They sent out a member of a crisis response team to assess my situation, to see what my immediate needs were. They set up a arrangement for me to go to an emergency room, although it ended up that my sister ended up driving down to take me there, which was good. It gave me and my sister a chance to talk about stuff that we hadn't talked about in years. They never gave me any real diagnosis of what was causing the pain. They just gave me, cortisone type shot of some sort. Said that should take care of your pain. Go home. The pain gradually subsided over the next, I think it was 4 days, and it finally disappeared. But I get back home. The crisis team has assigned me a temporary case manager who is going through and actually connecting me with the resources that I need. And one of the things they got me connected into was a rehabilitation program for individuals suffering from severe mental illness. That is really what started me on my path to recovery. It's a wonderful program. Everyone there is just so supportive and caring and patient. My sister as well was very supportive and helpful, and for a while she was taking me to the appointments where I'd have to actually go into the program office instead of their staff member coming over to my home and talking with me there. And finally, I had started improving enough that I was willing to start taking arranged transportation trips that are covered under the state's main Medicaid or insure, or they cover the cost of transportation to and from medical appointments for their members. We found medication that it took several months, but man, once it finally kicked in, I I had never felt better in my life. It was such a relief for the depression to be gone, to be able to feel genuinely good. Unfortunately, it didn't really help the anxiety at all, but I at least, without having the depression sitting on top of me, could better manage the anxiety through simply force of will. Slowly over time, I got myself to the point where I was able to take out my trash again, and I was able to get my mail, on top of using the ride service to get to and from my medical appointments. The rehabilitation program did have a fairly high turnover in staff. It's just kind of the nature of the business, what they can pay their employees and that sort of thing. But everybody that I was in contact with, truly just wonderful individuals. I can't thank them enough. They wouldn't do things for me, but they would do them with me. So they walked me through, what I needed to do to get access to the public assistance programs that I needed. So I was soon on Medicaid, instead of just being on the temporary emergency Medicaid for hospital visits, like, was all that I'd had for the past 12, 13 years. They encouraged me to go ahead and apply for SNAP, which, since I was on Medicaid, I automatically qualified for. They were very supportive in getting me information for applying for Social Security disability. That was very much a different process, not so easy as the Medicaid and the SNAP were, though. The problem with disability was that their determination has to be based on the last time I had worked, and there was a certain period of time after that, where they needed to find medical records establishing that I was disabled and unable to work during that time. And I had lost so much of my information about who my insurers were and all of that during the period I was isolated, that while they acknowledged that I was currently disabled and unable to work, they couldn't establish that I had actually been disabled at that previous period. And so they would not approve me for disability, but they did approve me for SSI. It was something, at least. And things just gradually continued getting better after that, because again, I was on medication that was helping me. Anxiety was still the problem, but at least I was functioning a little bit more. I had ceased all self-care during the latter half of my isolation period. So we're talking, I went like 6 or 7 years, wasn't showering, wasn't brushing my teeth. I wasn't very consistent with getting myself stuff to eat. Sometimes if I did get myself stuff to eat, I would binge because I just didn't care. Wouldn't do laundry at all. No cleaning in my condo. It was a mess. I was finally able to slowly start building some of those habits back up again. I'm still not the best when it comes to laundry. I tend to hand wash in my bathtub when I need to do laundry rather than take it over to the laundry room. And it's one of my goals for myself is to get myself actually taking it to the laundry room so stuff will actually get a lot cleaner than it gets if I just do it in the bathtub. Being in that rehabilitation program made a huge difference for me. It was so wonderful finding genuinely supportive and caring people where I had not been surrounded by such people for most of my life. And as I said before, my sister was also a big help, even though she still deals with her own problems and her job and all of that. My sister did do a lot for me and continues to do things for me. I did eventually graduate from the rehabilitation program because it was designed for those going through severe mental illness, and I wasn't severe anymore. For me, it's like if the mental illness is still there, it still has to be managed, but it's not so severe that I needed to be in that program. My care got transferred onto Medicaid insurer's default provider for my depression and anxiety. I have got the most wonderful therapist in the world. I love her to death. I absolutely am not looking forward to the day where she might move on and I won't be able to see her anymore. So yeah, I'm much better off right now. My mom did pass away a few years ago, and my sister and I have just finally gotten the worst of the trust administration handled. That's another thing that I really don't want to get into. I'm now able to get back off of SSI, thanks to my inheritance. And that in itself feels good. I've been able to replace a lot of stuff in my condo. That more or less covers the bulk of the emotional stuff. Naturally, I didn't want these videos to continue on forever, so I limited in describing all of the things that went on. I've just given, some examples that would do a good job of explaining the types of things that I have been going through. The only thing I think now left to talk about is the spiritual journey. And so I will sign off this video. So peace, love, and joy to all of you. Remember, there is hope. I promise you. Take care.